Uh-oh.
Okay, we'll start with this. Reacting to this past weekend's super featherweight undisputed title fight between champion Alycia Baumgardner and Jennifer Miranda, WBC lightweight champion Carolyn Dubois said, on that note, Alycia Baumgardner is a gimmick fighter. I'd love a piece of that pie. I'm certain Jake Paul could make it happen. Maybe not next, but definitely something we can build up to. I believe us two in the ring is the next big female fight.
To which a Twitter user that goes by the name Esquire stated, not the best call out I've ever read. You will notice that in the comments section of that tweet, there are quite a few individuals letting Carolyn Dubois have it. Willie Lynch, friend of the channel, said, "You talk pretty bold for someone who refuses to fight another champion at your own weight." To which Jake responded, "Exactly. Got all this shit to say, but scared as hell to fight Beatrice Ferreira."
Carolyn responded to those tweets by simply stating, "Aww." Aunt Brown stated, "Clean up your own division. What the hell? You haven't fought the other champions in your division but want to move down to fight a smaller fighter after you see her have a bad fight? Looks weak as hell. Champions in your division calling your name and you're calling out somebody smaller?" Croydon Hooligan said, "Why not next? You don't want Beatrice next. You don't want Baumgardner next. You just want the easiest route." Peter Puritan said, "You're trying to bring another super featherweight up instead of fighting a champion in your own division," highlighting that in Carolyn's last fight, she didn't even fight a lightweight. She fought Bomi Shin, a super feather, that gave her all she could handle, by the way.
After Carolyn Dubois had gassed out in the later rounds,
Alberto Vasquez said, "Aren't you ducking someone in your own weight class?" And there are many more tweets just like these in the comment section of Carolyn Dubois' tweet. Carolyn, who's not really endearing herself to the fans by saying this and that about more well-known fighters than she is. She said this and that about Katie Taylor, now she's saying this and that about Alycia Baumgardner.
she's also very selective about what champions at her own weight she wants to fight. She's all about fighting Terry Harper, but doesn't seem to have any time for Beatrice Ferreira.
More and more people are starting to figure that out. None of this is endearing Carolyn Dubois to the fans, because not only do you talk too much, you don't earn their favor with who you're fighting. You do seem to want to target low-hanging fruit. If the first thing you do after Alycia has a lackluster showing is start calling her out, that makes it obvious. You want to stay on the easy route.
That doesn't even mean that Alycia would be easy for Carolyn, but if the first thing you do after she has a bad showing is start calling her out instead of calling out Beatrice,
Comes off as cowardly.
so you're not winning over the fans in the mean in-between time, with your attitude, and in the fights that you're having, you're not fighting who people want to see you fight.
You don't think people want to see her fight Alycia?
No, I think they would. I think that could be a big fight if and when it gets made, but people are noticing that she's looking in every other direction instead of Beatrice's direction, who's right there. She just fought. You're free, so is she, and you want to talk about everybody else.
Call her out.
She comes off as cowardly to the spectators in what is this spectator sport, but here's the funny part. Where she's calling out Alycia Baumgardner for a fight, I think Alycia should fight her next. I think Alycia should fight her now. I think that Alicia's time at 130 pounds needs to come to an end. She needs to move up to 135 and fight Carolyn sooner rather than later.
Why?
Because time is on Carolyn's side. Carolyn is several years younger than Alicia Baumgardner, but she is also a lot less experienced. So now is the time to strike, and now is the time to fight her. You don't want to give her time to amass more experience. That's just going to make her more dangerous and make you older.
Give her what she wants, and give it to her now. Put her on the spot. At worst, if you make her an offer, she turns it down and you call her a ducker. That's at worst. At the very best, you actually get the fight, you get a high-profile fight, and you teach this girl a lesson.
Take her to school.
Carolyn talks too much. She models her boxing persona after her idol, Clarissa Shields. So it's no wonder why she's not really endearing herself to the boxing community at large. She just comes off as mouthy and obnoxious. Which wouldn't be the worst thing in the world if she were winning over fans with her fights, with her opponents, but she's not really doing that either.
Give her what she wants. The old saying goes, be careful what you wish for, because you just might get it. Get her in the ring.
She's failing herself because she's been pouncing on all these girls that everybody knows that she can beat. For some reason, she thinks she's allowed to skip steps and be fast-tracked to the big fights with the big names. Give her what she wants. Exactly what she wants.
So that she learns the hard way. It's way too soon for this, and you're talking too much. Humble yourself before somebody comes along and takes that title from you.
Steroid positives in the last couple of months. The latest one is Francisco Rodriguez, who beat Galiafai. It was a great performance, but he popped now. What are your thoughts on all of this?
I think it's just crazy, man. I feel like, once you have 7 different fighters that come up positive in your camp, for performance-enhancing drugs, I think somebody should take a look at that camp like, hey, what are they doing in there? You know what I mean? But nobody wants to ask questions. Nobody wants to say nothing. So it's not even, I find that kind of really messed up, and it's really biased, because if it was our camp, we had 7 guys coming out positive for steroids, they'd be like, man, you guys need to take that guy's license away. You can't let him move around like that. And we would be suspended right away. But, the cash cow always wins. Some people like to stay quiet. Some people don't like to say nothing. But that's 7 guys. That's 7 different people. And that's just something that you cannot ignore it no more. I think just Canelo needs to stop having barbecues at his house. That's what needs to stop happening.
While we can hardly fault David for answering a question, something that he's being asked about by Mike Kopinger, it still comes off as hypocritical to point the finger at Eddie Reynoso for what may be going on at his gym and what fighters testing positive for banned substance he might have some association with when you're associating with a known dope dealer.
Your strength and conditioning coach is Memo Heredia, and we all know what his history is. And just because the fighters that he's working with aren't testing positive for banned substances, that doesn't mean they're not using banned substances. All that means is they're not getting caught.
Look at the size of David Benavidez while he sits there with Mike Kopinger. Tell me he doesn't look like he's somewhere around 200 and change. Looks to be a cruiserweight or a heavyweight in between fights. And this is a guy who boils down to 175.
Look at the size of him.
Used to boil down to 168. And you expect me to believe that he didn't have a little help in doing that?
Cut the malarkey.
I saw him standing next to Anthony Yarde. I saw them side by side at what was the kickoff press conference for Turkey's November show. And he made Anthony Yarde look small. He made Anthony Yarde look like a super middleweight. Yarde's been a light heavyweight his entire boxing career, but he actually looked small next to David Benavidez, who's only been there for what? 2 or 3 fights?
So you have to wonder, how does a guy who's ballooning in weight in between fights upwards of 200 or 200 and change regularly get down to 175? It was a pleasant surprise when the fight between them was announced. And I think that David is finally starting to move in the right direction. But Canelo Alvarez will continue to be a sore spot for David. He resents him. He resents having to fight light heavyweights now. He resents having to campaign there. He's pouting.
And this entire situation between him and Anthony Yarde is a byproduct of the marquee value that David doesn't have. Because if he really were a moneymaker at the gate and at the box office, the PBC would not have outsourced him. They could do his next fight with the confidence that it would generate money. But when you loan him out to Turkey Al Sheikh, that says the opposite. That says, doing this guy's fights are more trouble than it's worth, so we'll rent him out and we'll take our cut. That way we make a profit, no expense to us. It's smart business.
I'm not saying it isn't.
But some people would have you believe that David is a lot more popular than he actually is, that he's a bigger draw than he actually is, when the biggest part of promoting David Benavidez is talking about Canelo. And outside of that, people just ain't that interested.
The Smith fight, that fell apart, if he would have had it, or the Yarde fight that he's about to have, if he would have had it on the PBC side of things, and if it would have been a PBC pay-per-view, $80 a pop, how many people do you think would have bought it?
If the PBC felt that a lot of people were going to buy those fights, they would have been happy to put up the money to make them happen here in America, with the confidence that they would not only get their money back, but generate a profit. The way they went about it indicates the opposite. We can't afford to blow more money on David, so we're gonna rent him out.
I always said that in the light heavyweight division, that's an international division. America doesn't have all the fighters. Many of the somebodies at light heavyweight are international guys from across the pond, like Callum Smith,
Joshua Buatsi, Anthony Yarde. The two main guys at the weight are two Russians, not two Americans. America doesn't have much of a stake in the light heavyweight division, and the PBC, they don't have any bodies there. That's why for a long time, I felt that David Benavidez would move up to cruiserweight sooner than later for Zurdo.
because he already had the fight with David Morrell, and that's the only other light heavyweight that fights under the PBC banner. To my surprise, he stuck around. To my surprise, he's fighting Anthony Yarde, and I like that fight. I'm looking forward to it.
I'm gonna buy it, but I don't have any illusions about how it came together or why. Desperate times call for desperate measures, and there's a reason that the PBC's only two light heavyweights have both been rented out to Turkey El Sheikh. David Morrell just fought this past weekend. In November, it's David's turn.
David Benavidez.
It's a great fight, but underneath it all, I think he resents having to have it. I think he's very much angry at Canelo Alvarez and the situation that he's in. We haven't heard Samson Lukowicz weigh in on all of this. What has turned out to be David Benavidez's Saudi debut.
He's losing control.
Remember that not but a few months ago, he said he was vehemently against David boxing in Saudi. He would prefer he stay here in America. A few months later, look,
What changed your mind?
something did. Something must have, because we've all heard the tune that both David and Samson were singing not that long ago. This recent turn of events must have been sparked by something, and I think it's desperation. Desperate times call for desperate measures.
Buddy, Benavidez versus Yarde is one of the better fights to make in the light heavyweight division, and in spite of all my criticisms of David and how he's gone about things, I actually like this move. Irrespective of what brought it on, this is what I wanted.
In men's heavyweight news, ahead of this weekend's mega rematch, I should say, between Daniel Dubois and Alexander Usyk, Frank Warren says, "I'm not worried about Daniel being the underdog in the rematch, and neither is he." Frank Warren believes that Daniel Dubois will once again make a mockery of his underdog status and beat Alexander Usyk in their upcoming undisputed heavyweight title fight. IBF champion Dubois will face Ring Magazine, WBC, WBA, and WBO champion Usyk in a rematch at London's Wembley Stadium on July 19th. Over 7,000 tickets have already been sold for the fight, which could see Dubois make history.
Remember that this is for all the marbles. This is for undisputed.
And remember that Daniel Dubois was the underdog in his last fight. His big win over Anthony Joshua, he was the betting underdog going in. Although Dubois' fellow Brit Lennox Lewis was universally recognized as the undisputed heavyweight champion when he outpointed Evander Holyfield in 1999, Lewis never held the WBO title.
It wasn't deemed as necessary at the time. That has changed over time.
Daniel recently told Talk Sport that beating the 38-year-old Usyk would be the greatest victory in boxing, and his promoter Warren agrees with the Londoners' assessment, what they would look as recompense.
Revenge for the victory they think they were robbed of in Poland.
Look, the blue ribbon is the heavyweight division. I think everybody agrees on that, Warren told Queensbury. The 4 belts are on the line. It's the biggest one out there. No Brit has ever held the 4 belts. Dubois is still only 27 years old, but his 8-year pro career has been a roller coaster ride. His prodigious punching power and a whole host of leaked stories about his sparring exploits meant that he was anointed as a future heavyweight champion before even entering the professional ranks. Things went perfectly until November of 2020, 5 years ago, when Joe Joyce's thudding jab cracked his eye socket and forced him to take a knee in the 10th of their British Commonwealth and European title fight. From that point on, a man once touted as the division's future was widely written off as a front-runner who would crumble the moment he encountered any resistance. Critics were given further fuel by the way he broke down mentally during his first fight with Usyk. Fighting the Ukrainian is an exhausting and frustrating experience, though Dubois sank to his knee and allowed himself to be counted out in the 9th of their unified heavyweight title fight in Poland 2 summers ago.
Suddenly fighting for his career, the lack of expectation seemed to wake something up inside Dubois. He stopped Jarrell Miller, then Filip Hrgovic, in genuine make-or-break fights, and last September arrived at Wembley Stadium for his fight with Anthony Joshua as the IBF champion.
A self-assured Daniel Dubois looked absolutely unstoppable from the moment he left his dressing room and demolished the 2-time unified heavyweight champion in 5 one-sided rounds to cement his status as a trustworthy world champion. Warren is stuck with Dubois since the very start of his career, and although Dubois will be an underdog once again this weekend, the Hall of Fame promoter believes that he is in the perfect spot to score a famous victory. He's not been the favorite going into his last 4 fights. Make that 5 fights because the bookmakers are making Usyk the favorite, Warren said. He wasn't the favorite in Poland, those Riyadh season fights with Miller and Hrgovic, and certainly wasn't the favorite against Anthony Joshua when he went into the Lion's Den. I ain't worried about that, and he's not worried about it. He's in a good place of mind, believes in himself and his ability, as we do. That's why we've made the fight. His trainer, Don Charles, is calling it destiny. He's a very dramatic and theatrical guy, very emotional.
He's been letting Usyk have a piece of his mind ever since Usyk stopped Daniel, forced him to take a knee, essentially beating him into submission. So what are the odds that Daniel can get it right the second time out? What's different? Well, Usyk is what? 1 or 2 years older than he was.
He's older now than when they initially met, so Daniel has that working for him. But being honest, I don't see a terribly different fighter here today in Daniel than the one I saw fighting Usyk. He's not that different a guy. He's doing the same stuff. It's the same X's and O's.
All that's really different about Daniel now is the headspace he's in. That he's a lot more confident, so he'll likely go out there and take a lot more chances. That could be a good thing, that could be a bad thing.
It all depends on how it ends, because the ends have to justify the means.
If Usyk beats this guy again, if he beats him for a second time on Saturday, I would really like to see him wrap it up. Close the show. Call it a career. There's no more reason to stick around. You're pushing it. At 38 years old in a division where you're always 1 punch away from being knocked out.
Even if you beat Daniel before, he's still a threat now that you're fighting him again. We have to acknowledge that on a long enough timeline, nobody's invincible. Not if you stick around too long.
Take care of him and get out.